welcome everyone to another episode of Kindling the Hearthfire. How's everyone? I hope you had a good time this year. I know I did. I want to wish everyone a happy belated holidays and New Year. Hope your 2019 is already shaping up to be better than your 2018. We had a wonderful time celebrating the season with my grove mates and my family and my partner's family, and I hope everyone else had a wonderful season. I also want to say a quick hi and shout out to my listeners in the Southern Hemisphere. I hope you had a great time with your summer celebrations. Right now, you can find our podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, and on Patreon. I would appreciate any and all reviews, especially on iTunes, which makes it easier for people to find us. Go and check it out and maybe even help support the podcast. All websites will be listed with links in the show notes as per usual. Now on to the rest of the podcast that I know you guys have been waiting for quite a bit of time. Technical issues along with personal issues had made this a big delay, but now on to the rest of the podcast, what you've been waiting to see. Alright, so Welsh traditions. There's a lot of Welsh traditions that are surround this time of year, and not all of them are associated with Christmas in specific. A lot of them are appreciated just for the winter time and the middle of the winter, and maybe even into the new year. There's several different ones that I would like to talk about briefly, of course. One in particular that I found very interesting was called the Mary Lwyd song and tradition. Basically, the song and tradition during this time of year, it can even go into New Year. It's very similar to trick-or-treating almost, where these a small group of people, one of which is dressed up in a sheet and a horse's skull covered in ribbons and other decorative items. The person that is wearing the mare's head is escorted by a couple group of men who are also dressed up in very colorful clothing, and they basically go house to house asking for meals and drink and celebrating the season with the household. And that doesn't sound too spectacular, but the way with the mare's head, that might be a little spectacular with ribbons and all that kind of stuff. But what makes it really fun is that they don't ask for permission to come into your home with just words. They actually do it in song form. And they're asking you for permission to come in, and generally speaking, people allow them in. They have a couple of drinks, and then they leave, and they move on to the next house or the next business. But there is an option where if you don't want them to come into your house, or you just want to have a little bit of fun, you can actually challenge them to what my partner aptly called a rap battle. Basically, you basically have to go in song, but also in rhyme. Telling them why they can't enter your house or some things of that nature. It doesn't happen very often that they're denied, but it's really, really fun when you actually see someone actually challenge the Mary Lwyd before they enter your home. It's a lot of fun to see. I've actually got a copy here of the Mary Lwyd song, the official song being sung, and it was recorded. Let me see if I can find the information. But it was recorded, I believe, actually, here it is. It's, no, that's not when it's recorded. But there is a poem associated with the Mary Lwyd by T.S. Eliot called the Ballad of the Mary Lwyd. And it is, his manuscript is annotated by T.S. Eliot at the British Library. And there will be links in the show notes so you can find that. But it's a Welsh poet called Vernon Watkins. He paid tribute to his nation's customs in 1941. It begins with Mary Lwyd, House of Frost, Star Horse and White Horse of the Sea, is carried to us. The dead return. Those exiles carry her. They who seem holy and have put on corruption. They who seem corrupt and have put on holiness. They strain against the door. They strain towards the fire that fosters and warms the living. There's been lots of art that is associated with the Mary Lwyd. It's very associated with song and dance. Mary Lwyd actually means the Grey Mare or the Grey Mary. No one knows exactly where this tradition came from, but it is still going on very strongly today. And let me show you a clip of one of the traditional songs that was what's be sung house to house and business to business. And I'll give you the translation afterwards.
Wel dyma ni'n dywad gyfeillion, di niwad I ofyn cawn gannad, I ofyn cawn gannad, I ofyn cawn gannad I gannim. Os na chawn I gannad rowch glywad ar ganiad, pa fodd mae'r madawiad, pa fodd mae'r madawiad, pa fodd mae'r madawiad nos enom. Ni dorson ein crympa wrth groesi'r stigila, iddo fo tag yma, iddo fo tag yma, iddo fo tag yma nos enom. Os na ddynion all dorri englynion, rowch glywad yn union, rowch glywad yn union, rowch glywad yn union nos enom. Os eisthoch rhy gynnar i'r gwelyn ddialgar, o codwch yn awdgar, o codwch yn awdgar, o codwch yn awdgar nos enom. A disian fras felys a phob sort o spices, o torrwch yn ratus, o torrwch yn ratus, o torrwch yn ratus y gwylam. Bwch a baril, a llengwch a'n rigil, a rannwch a'n gynnil, a rannwch a'n gynnil, a rannwch a'n gynnil y gwylam.
Okay, in that great rendition of the Mary Lwyd in St. Fagans, this is the translation for what you just heard. It says, "Well, gentle friends, here we come, to ask may we have leave to sing. If we may not have leave, then listen to the song that tells of our leaving tonight. We have cut our shins crossing the stiles to come here tonight. If there are people here who can compose, then let us hear them now, tonight. If you've gone to bed too early in a vengeful spirit, oh, get up again good-naturedly tonight. The large sweet cake with all kinds of spices, oh, cut generous slices this Christmas tide. Oh, tap the barrel and let it flow freely. Don't share it meanly this Christmas tide." And that was the translation of what you just heard. It's the Mary Lwyd song. This is a particular version that was done in, I'm probably butchering the Welsh, but it's in St. Fagans. It was collected on October 1953 at Bryn Menwyn near Brigend, Glamorgan. It's from William Morgan Rose at Rees. Who was a railway worker in that particular date. He was born 1883. Another tradition that I found fairly interesting is on Twelfth Night in the 19th century Wales, and they still do it somewhat today, not as much though. Groups of men would go out hunting the wren. Once captured, not killed, the tiny bird would be caged in a wooden box and carried door to door for all to see. Connotations behind this tradition, but it's been going on since the early 18th and 19th century, and it still goes on today in a very more limited scope. And there was one last tradition that I wanted to go for before I move on in the podcast, called Kellinnig. It's basically from dawn until noon on New Year's Day. Children in early Wales would go door to door singing rhymes and splashing people with water and asking for kelling, which were gifts of small change. Basically, they would go door to door and carol for them, and then if they didn't want to give them money, they would splash them with water. I believe how it would be done. It basically is very similar to trick or treat. You're asking for candy, or you're asking for small favors door to door and paying for those treats with singing. Right abouts. It's taken from the Anglo-Saxon and Tudor customs. An ornate bowl would be filled with fruit, sugar, spices, and topped with a warm beer. All right. So next up, we have a very special treat for you. John Hyatt of Gifts of the Wyrd podcast has sent in a submission for this holiday season. Being it's a little late, you might want to use this for the next holiday season. It's a wonderful recording, and I hope you enjoy listening and maybe get some ideas for your next midwinter celebration.
This is John from the Coast Oak Grove in San Diego, California, also known as Jan from the Gifts of the Wyrd podcast, and I'm really happy to be a part of sharing a fun tradition that I learned about last year, and hopefully other people will be able to incorporate this into some of their winter solstice celebrations. Winter solstice is a time that is really special for a lot of people and for many reasons, so this is a great way to brighten that occasion and have a lot of fun with the family. This is called the Vantlusttaken candles, or lighting the sun wake candles. It is a new tradition that was developed in Sweden to mark the final weeks of the dark part of the year, waiting for the return of the sun. I discovered this last year and really liked the concept of it, added it to a similar tradition that I share already with my husband. It really gives me some time to just kind of sit back and think and pause and have a really nice moment of quiet and peace. This re-envisions the Advent candles, which has been part of Swedish and other European cultures for centuries, and it brings it back to those who are practicing a pre-Christian faith. The lighting of candles crosses all cultures, and it's a way to help us focus our intent and to contemplate about some deeper meanings for the coming year. This is also a great family event, especially the preparing and decorating of the candles, the candle holders, and during the ceremony to engage in their thoughts and processes and hopes and the things that they want to be a part of. So everyone could be a part of this. So the Vantlusttaken is a series of candles. It's 6 candles that are lit in the weeks beginning or before winter solstice or Yule. So, lighting of the candles begins about 6 weeks prior to the winter solstice. This is from the Facebook Vantlusttaken, and this is what they've developed. It's very flexible. So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but Thursday were selected because of the Swedish tradition known as Thorshelg. I contacted one of the organizers who replied that the reason for the Thursday is that Thursdays have a traditional significance in Scandinavian lore. Thursdays have been a day for trolldom or folk magic, also for communicating with the gods and nature spirits. This was long before, and it continued into Christian times. There's also accounts as late as the 19th century where the Thorshelg, or Thor's Hallow, was celebrated by inviting Thor and Frigga to the house on a Thursday night. So she continued to state that other cultures have a specific holy day, so she suggested just use that day if you like. Or one can do is find out which day the 21st falls on, and then the 5 weeks prior of that day, that's the day that you do the first 5 candles, and then the 6th will be on the final, the 21st, or whatever day you select. And then the another alternative is one might just do the 5 days prior to Yule, and then light the candle on the 6th day. Or if you're coming to it a little bit late, it's okay, because you just do the candles up until where you start, and then you can continue on from that point. Since this is a tradition in development, she said, it's okay to just pursue it and do it on whichever day that you want. What is meaningful for you, for your family? This is such a personalized thing, and it's just a really great way. And she said that she just thinks that everyone should feel free to do what they're most comfortable, because we're all creating this together. So what does a Vantlusttaken night look like? Well, it's pretty simple, actually, or it can be as elaborate as you want. The procedure is basically prior to, you get 6 candles, you dress them, you inscribe the Elder Futhark on each candle. Each candle represents one of the first 6 letters of the Futhark. And because we chose the Futhark is because in a heathen tradition, and so this is part of our culture and our cosmology and our pantheon. But one could also use the Ogham or the the Olympian Oracle or something else. So there's flexible. It's a great way to do this. So you inscribe on the candle or on the candle base, or paint, or if you use paint, though, don't use a non-toxic one because this is going to burn down. We don't want toxic fumes. And you also can decorate the really nice candle holder. It can be individual candle holders or one that has 6 holders. However you want. I saw one really cool one on the Van Lusthokken website or Facebook page where the person took tiny little clay planting pots and decorated each one and then set them all up in a bigger clay pot. Each a little candle goes into each one, and that was a really cool idea. I like that a lot. You're only limited by your imagination. Then on the night, the night of, you select the night, and where there's a poem that it's written in Swedish, but it's translated into English, Dutch, French, and German. And all of those are listed on the Facebook page, and I'm sure it could be translated into other languages if you so wanted to, into Gaelic or Greek or Latin or Italian or something. So there's no limit on what can be done with that. It could even be done in Klingon, I think, which would be fun. So on the night of, you get into a meditative place. You can set space the best way that you want to, if you need to. If you're doing this in your home, your space is probably already pretty clear and secure and spiritually protected. But if you feel like there's some frantic energy or whatever, just clear that out and then create that space. You recite the poem. I usually contemplate on the meaning of the Futhark rune that we're contemplating that night, and add that energy and call that energy, thank that energy for the year prior for what it brought in, such as Fehu is for prosperity and wealth. I think about all the wonderful things that have come from the year before. And then I ask for it to follow in and bring in the new year. And as I go into the new year, that I have those aspects and things too. Uru's strength. May I have the strength to go through and deal with the things that I need to deal with. So these first 6 letters were part of just a runic guide. It's the first 6. There's no reason other than they just help us to bring in special blessings for the new year. You can do what you like. You do a little meditation on that, and then you light the candle while you're doing that, just the one for each night. After you're done, you can douse the candle. The next week, you light the first one. I like to just kind of remind myself of that energy and thank Fehu or thank the one or the ones before. And then you do the process again for the next rune, the next candle. And you continue on. And once you get to the final on the winter solstice, is to light them all and let them all burn themselves out completely so they can release all of that wonderful energy into the new year. Please monitor the candles. Don't leave them unattended. Don't leave them near flammable things. No bonfires made from these candles in the house, that's for sure. If you decide to do any other part of ceremony, that's all part of however you want to create it. And that's pretty much it for the Van Lusthokken process and what it involves. It's really a meaningful tradition for me. It's a great way for us in Druidry to develop our practices with our families and with our groves or our kindreds and the people that we are doing meaningful practices with, and to develop our relationships with the kindreds. This is in meaningful ways for us today. It's bringing a bit of history, it's bringing a bit of tradition and culture into something that we do today, and it helps us to really connect well, I think. So a link to the Van Lusthokken Facebook page will be in the show notes, and I've did a podcast about this on the Gifts of the Wyrd and a blog post about it. On that podcast, the Van Lusthokken poem is read in Swedish by a friend of mine, so you can hear it in Swedish. I also read it in English, but it's really cool because we can have the Swedish version if we'd like to hear it or play it while we're doing the ritual. If you do this, you want to share your photos on the Van Lusthokken website, it's there as well. They love to see your experience, love to see your candles, and love to hear your experiences. So thank you very much, and happy Yule.
Thank you so much, John, for writing in, and I hope to hear more from everyone in the future. And if you want to hear more of John's stuff, he's actually runs the podcast, Gift of the Wyrd. A wonderful heathen podcast that you really all should listen to if you're on that path, or if you just want to hear some really good information about what the heathens are up to, and that kind of thing. So, and all the links and stuff will also be in the show notes, and I'll put a link to his website and his podcast as well if you're interested. All right, so next up is our book review. Alright, so today we're going to be kind of breaking from the mold because I usually go with a lot of nonfiction authors. Because that's usually what I read. And generally pagan fiction isn't really my thing. But today I'm breaking up with the mold because I actually found a series written by an author that I absolutely adore her writing. And she's also an indie author, so I would totally love to see her get some more support. And I'm of course talking about Sarah Buhrman. She actually wrote the Runespell series, and she's still writing the Runespell series. She's got the second one out now on Kindle edition, and I'm just getting through with the first one, and I'm reading the second one now. And I totally would recommend this for anybody who wants something that's a little bit more modern, but it also has a lot of pagan elements and paganism involved, and witchcraft involved, magic involved, the gods are involved. There's lots of things going on in here, and it's also a story of a young woman named Nicola. She basically from the let's give you just the summary from the Amazon because they do it fairly well. Nicola was never a hero. She was an everyday single mother, heathen witch, and an herbalist. She was happy with her quiet life until the night Joseph showed up at her door with news that her stepsister joined a cult, and then she had gone missing. Pressured by family loyalties, Nicola goes back to Indianapolis, dodging old enemies and calling on old friends to help her find her stepsister. What she finds instead is an ex with superpowers, monsters, and demigods on the streets, and a detective ready to bring her in for a murder investigation or 3. Can Nicola become the hero she needs to be, or will she lose everyone she cares for? Really great intro to what the book's about. It hits a lot of points for this one, and I just got through reading it, and I really, really enjoyed it. I can't really say much more than what was done in the summary, otherwise I would give so much away. But it's called Too Wyrd. The first one in the series is called Too Wyrd. It's basically spelled T-O-O, and Wyrd is spelled like weird, W-Y-R-D, and that's the first book in the series. And right now it's on Kindle Unlimited for $3.99 on the Kindle. You can also get it for can't talk today. You can get it from Barnes & Noble as well if you want a brick and mortar store, or you can get it pretty much from most online stores that I've seen around. You've got Amazon, you've got Weiser Books, and you've got several other online retailers that are selling it. But it's on Amazon for $3.99, and that's where she posted originally, I believe, but I'm not too sure about that. But I'll put up her website and give you a list of all her, which gives you a list of all her books, and whether or not you're going for the Too Wyrd series, she's probably got a book for you in her repertoire. She has been fairly prolific. So I'm giving this a thumbs up, and it definitely belongs on your bookshelf, whether it's digital or it's a physical bookshelf. But pick it up today. Support an indie author and get a great book in too. So yeah, that's my book review for my first fiction book today. So it's basically I'm basically telling you to go buy anything of Sarah Burnham's because she's an awesome author. But if you want to get started with her works in the fiction and the pagan world, Too Wyrd, the Runespell series, is probably a good place to start. And I will put links to all of her pages and her books in the show notes if you want to take a look. Okay, and next up is going to be our recipe cooking portion of the show. And this time you're in for a real treat. The days are getting shorter and the nights cooler, and for my family in particular, rich chocolatey fudge has always been a yummy tradition during this time of year, both to cook for our family and also to share for family that isn't in the area, but we basically would mail out fudge to a couple people. we had an interesting interaction with lots of family concerning fudge, but I'll talk to you about that when I'm talking after I give you the recipe for the fudge. Now, this is the basic recipe that my family would take and modify to fit the situation and things of that nature. And I know that my partner's family has their own recipe as well for fudge, which is very similar but slightly different. But this is the basic recipe that I found works every time. It's made for a quick fudge, and you basically can find it on the back of the marshmallow fluff jars that they sell in most stores, and it works every time, and it makes really, really great fudge. So list of ingredients for this fudge recipe is you need 3 cups of sugar, 3/4 cups of butter, 1 small can. The 5-ounce can is always the best, because otherwise you're going to have to do a lot of measuring, and you have to be really exact with fudge. So getting the small 5-ounce can is always a great idea, and get it early because they sell out really, really fast, because a lot of people are making fudge. And you need 1 jar, or the 7-ounce jar, of the Jet Puff marshmallow cream. You can use regular marshmallows. I like using mini marshmallows because they're easier to measure. I don't have the exact measurements on me. I would say about 2 cups of the mini marshmallows, but don't quote me on that. I would just stick with the Jet Puff marshmallow cream for your first batch, and then see where you go from there. 1 cup or more of chopped Planters walnuts. And it's 1 cup after they've been chopped for me, because I like a lot of walnuts in my my fudge. So it's 1 cup after they've been chopped. So it's a lot of walnuts. You might even add more if you like. If you really like walnuts like I do. And 1 teaspoon vanilla. We actually have homemade vanilla. My partner Vernon actually takes vanilla beans and sticks them in vodka and actually lets them soak in it. We actually have vanilla essence, or however you want to put it, but we have that, and we use that for most of my recipes, which is awesome. But we actually had to buy vanilla this time around because he just put in a new batch, so it wasn't quite not vodka-ish at this point. So we had to use some from the store, which was disappointment, but meh, it happens. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. This is very somewhat different from when I do for my own fudge, but follow directions if you will. This is line a 9-inch square pan with foil, with the ends of foil extending over the sides. This makes it easier to get the fudge out after you're done, and you can actually cut it into squares a lot easier without dirtying up your pan. Neat idea. You bring the sugar, butter, and evaporated milk to a full rolling boil in a large, heavy saucepan on medium heat, stirring constantly so that you're not burning anything, because the milk, the sugar, and the butter are very prone to burning, so you have to stir it constantly. And you have to be really, really careful, because you're bringing it up to a boil and it's melting sugar and things of that nature, so be careful when you're stirring it that you're not splashing it. It has to be stirred constantly but carefully. And one other thing I would say for you is actually put the butter in first and melt that completely, and then add the sugar, and then you would add the evaporated milk, so you make less of a mess and it's a little easier that it all comes together. Alright, so after that, after you bring it to a rolling boil, you cook for 4 minutes. I set a timer, and it works every time for the timer. But if you want to get technical, or if you don't have a timer on hand, or you want to try it, or you have a new candy thermometer that you got for Christmas or something of that nature, and you want to try it out, or you just like candy thermometers, that's fine. Or you put the candy thermometer in and you keep it boiling until the mixture reaches 234 degrees on the candy thermometer, while still stirring constantly. Remove from heat and add chocolate and marshmallow cream. I usually add the marshmallow cream first, and then I add the chocolate. And you have to do this fairly quickly, because as soon as you add the chocolate, it starts to thicken up, and it gets really hard to stir. So you do that until it's melted, then you add the nuts and vanilla. Once again, this is done really fairly quickly. Don't rush, but make sure that you're doing it and incorporating everything fairly quickly. Then you will pour it into a prepared pan. Spread evenly to cover bottom of the pan. I actually just pour it in, spread it evenly without using a spoon or anything, and it usually it turns into swirls and droplets, and it gives it a little bit more of a textured look on the top, and things of that nature. And I've always loved having that on the top, being all textured and shiny and all that good stuff. Alright, let it cool completely. This takes about 30 minutes to an hour to actually go completely, especially in your pan. After it's cooled completely, they're telling you to use the foil handles that you've created to lift the fudge out of the pan, and then you set it on the cutting board and you basically cut it into squares so it's easier to handle and you can give it to people. That's an absolutely fantastic recipe. My family recipe is a little different, but this is a basic quick fudge recipe that it is based on, and it works every time. My mother used this recipe consistently throughout my childhood, and she was doing it up in the mountains. And the mountains tends to be a very difficult place to cook and get things boiling and things of that nature, and this recipe worked every time. So if it can work for my mother in the mountains, it'll work for you at home, wherever you want to do it. Alright, so enjoy your fudge. I've still got fudge that I've got left over. I'm actually going to be, I should not munch on it now, really, because it will clog up my, but this is so good. But funny story about the fudge this year. I made a bunch of fudge this year. First time I've made it since my mother passed away, which was very difficult because it's my mother's recipe. But I made it for the first time, and we had decided, randomly enough, to actually go visit my grandparents, and we were going to visit Vernon's parents, and family, Vernon's family, and so we were going to a lot of different places for family, and we're like, oh, what a great thing to have. We can bring them fudge, because Vernon loves my fudge, and she's like, and he didn't tell me this before I made the fudge, but his grandmother, I believe, it may have been his great-grandmother, but his grandmother of his family used to be the one that would make the fudge, and they hadn't had her fudge since she'd passed away some years ago. So basically we get to her cousin's house and we give her the fudge, and she starts crying because she's like, oh, I haven't had fudge since grandmother died, and dad died, and she tasted the fudge. She's like, oh my god, this is so good. And she was very emotional, and it was like shocking to me because I'm like, oh, okay, you had to alter your motive for bringing the fudge along. He wanted to be the one to make fudge for the rest of the family, but that's a whole different issue. But it was a good time. But the funny part of this story is that we go over to his cousin's house, another house, and we bring her some fudge too. We brought another batch of fudge for her. And the funny part of it is she actually had made fudge for us from her grandmother's recipe. So we basically had a fudge exchange at her family, and it was just hilarious. And her fudge is still have batches of her fudge as well, and they're a little bit different, but they're both very good recipes for fudge. Hers doesn't have walnuts in it, which I'm upset about. Well, not really upset, but just like, oh, there's no walnuts in here. Let's have some of my own fudge. But anyway, lovely fudge stories and lovely family, and it was a great time had by all. Okay. So next up we have our community calendar, and just for the record, if you would like your event listed here, send the show an email or message us on Facebook. So we've got 3 events coming up in the next several months, some coming up sooner than others. The first one that's coming up in the next couple weeks is PantheaCon, which is a pan-pagan convention here in San Jose at the Doubletree Hotel. It's there pretty much every year. And their website is pantheacon.com, and that will also be in the show notes. And they are running it on President's Day weekend, so visit their website to see more information and see what's going on. There's a lot of stuff for divination this year. I was looking at the schedule, and I was really excited what's happening this year. So it's coming up. Get your tickets soon, or buy them on the day, but get them soon and come join us at PantheaCon. The next one up is also a pan-pagan convention. It's Convocation. And last year they had it on February 22nd to the 25th, right after PantheaCon. The current dates aren't up yet on the website, but it probably has changed at this point. They're usually at the Dearborn Detroit Doubletree by the Hilton. And I will also put a link to their website as well in the show notes, because I am not reading out that whole website because it's a long one and it's complicated and all that good stuff. But it's coming up also in February. Alright, and Paganicon is coming up in March, 17th and 19th, so it's like St. Patrick's Day weekend, pretty much. It's over in the Doubletree Park Place in St. Louis, Minnesota, and their website is paganicon.org. And that'll be also in the show notes for you to check out the dates and see what's going on there. They're all wonderful conventions you can go to and wonderful events. And once again, if you want to get your event listed, throw me a message on Facebook or by email, and I'll try to get it up here. All right. Wrapping up, I would like to first thank John Hyatt for his lovely submission. Check out his podcast, Gifts of the Weird, here on Podbean or on iTunes, and leave him a review because it's an awesome podcast. I would also especially like to thank, again, Bonnie Landry, who you heard in the intro with Fire Burn Bright. We're getting ready to put the next podcast together here at Kindling the Hearthfire, and if you have any ideas, celebrations, poems, songs, invocations, or anything else you would like to hear on the podcast, please send them to kindlingthehearthfire@gmail.com. I would also love to see pictures of your celebrations and what you're up to this time of year. Either post them to the Facebook group or on Instagram with the hashtag KTH. Deadline for submissions for them to be actually put onto the next podcast, which is going to be concerning Imbolc, one of my favorite times of year, is going to be the January 31st. And you should tune in on Saturday, February 27th, for another episode of Kindling the Hearthfire. We will again be having a pre-show the hour before, so tune in on Blog Talk Radio for that, and call in if you would like to join the conversation. We will be discussing our plans for Imbolc and what we have done in the past. Should be fun. You can find our podcast once again on Stitchers, iTunes, Podbeans, Google Play, YouTube, and on Patreon, and pretty much everywhere else you can find podcasts. Be well, and may you continue to pray with a good fire.